Today, we are talking about social equity policy and community development. Here we go. So what we know is that to truly build an equitable cannabis industry, we have a lot of work to do, and it requires the support from the entire community. Today, we'll hear from groups working on behalf of social equity about their programs and efforts, what's working and what is still needed. I'm very happy to introduce you to Angela White, the Equity for Industry Program Manager at Success Centers here in San Francisco. Angela's focus is on developing sustainable career and entrepreneurial paths, previously less accessible to communities impacted by inequality and the war on drugs. She offers community members career assessments and coaching, job placement, access to on-the-job training, and job training for employment in the cannabis industry. She also assists verified equity applicants in obtaining the critical business experience, educational resources, and tool sets required to develop sustainable business models and achieve entrepreneurial success. Welcome, Angela. Next, we have Kika Keith, the co-founder of the Social Equity Owners and Workers Association. Kika is a social equity licensee, entrepreneur, and activist from South Central Los Angeles. As founder of the Life Development Group and co-founder of the Social Equity Owners and Workers Association, she specializes in promoting and achieving true social equity for the country's most marginalized and vulnerable communities. Kika was instrumental in helping to reform Los Angeles's cannabis social equity program and secure 100 additional retail licenses for social equity applicants. Everybody give it up for Kika. Next, we have Natalie Papillion, the founder and executive director from the Equity Organization. Natalie, I hope I got your last name right. Please correct me if I did not. Natalie is an activist, organizer, and drug policy-focused writer and historian who serves as the executive director for the Equity Organization, which is a New York-based nonprofit focused on advancing a more just, equitable, and effective approach to drug policy and its criminal justice-related implications. She also sits on the board of directors for the Last Prisoner Project, a not-for-profit organization that works at the intersection of cannabis policy and criminal justice reform. She's also the author of the forthcoming History, Reefer Madness, the unredacted history behind American marijuana prohibition. She also recently published a phenomenal 4-part study that dives into the historical and ideological underpinnings of America's cannabis policies and analyzes this impact that the country's had. Together with the Last Prisoner Project, she will be using the paper to advocate for a more just and effective approach to drug policy and criminal justice issues. And I'll actually post the link to this study in the chat in a moment because it really is essential reading. Welcome, Natalie. Finally, this conversation will be moderated by Wally Wong, our head of social equity education here at Meadow. Wally is a proud Angelino and has been a professional in the cannabis industry for the past 3 years. He's dedicated to seeing the Los Angeles cannabis economy grow in the most equitable way possible to benefit the communities that were destroyed by decades of racist, misguided policy. At Meadow, Wally is our lead instructor for our retail compliance curriculum, which we're rolling out with nonprofits and other community groups across the state. Most recently, we've collaborated with the Cal Asian Chamber of Commerce and Clark Howell to help their new cohort of equity applicants in Sacramento understand the licensing and compliance requirements. We've also been working with Miss Angela from Success Centers to share knowledge about how to compliantly manage dispensaries. And starting next week, Wally will be teaching a 3-part retail compliance curriculum with our academy in Los Angeles. Last but not least, we are in the process of developing content in collaboration with Cookies, Backbone, and Trim for a new workforce development program that will be launching on Green Flower Media. So without further ado, Wally, please take it away.
Hello, everyone. Happy Saturday. Thank you so much for everyone that's been participating in Meadowlands. Thank you for Angela, Natalie, and Kika for making time for this. I'm really excited about this discussion. I'm gonna post in the chat, and if I did it right, everybody, Angela, Natalie's, and Kika's respective websites, activate and participate. These are, in my opinion, some of the most forward-thinking organizations out there. They deserve your support. Put dollars to them, and educate yourself. about what's going on. To start up the discussion, Aria, I was looking over Natalie's first partner report this morning, thinking about how to start this discussion. Because I want to have some real talk today. Like, let's do some real talk. And I kind of did a little jam board. Aria, if you can share it. And I'm going to share one in the chat that we can all work on together as we have the discussion. But I was thinking about how much is covered under this term social equity. We hear it from so many different organizations inside the industry right now, and it covers so many different things. And everybody at this point is coming at it from a different angle. But under social equity, and I just went from website to website, I saw all these recurring words, right? But we all know inside the industry that this means very different things in cannabis. Individually, each one of these concepts are huge. When you're talking about opportunity in cannabis is very different. When we're talking about community in cannabis is very different. When we're talking about fairness, that's very different in cannabis. Barriers to entry, all these concepts, and I don't think we put enough credence to that. When we're talking about fundraising, that's not the same for social equity operators in cannabis. It's not remotely the same thing. And when we're talking about the real talk of generational trauma, enforcement, incarceration, these are active things that are happening inside cannabis, have been happening. So I'm gonna share one a link right here that those that are listening, I'd love for you to participate. I'm all about the activation as we talk, and you guys you kind of get the gist. You can add your own Post-it notes to it when you hit the link, and tell me what it what equity means to you.
Wally, I don't think we're seeing the link. Do you want to
just put it up? I just did privately. Let me do send
click everyone.
Yes, let me do it. There we go. Did I do the other one? Yeah. Oh, and I did the other one. Hold on. Sorry. It went to
okay. It's Saturday. You're good.
I know. I'm not the best at it. Let me do it right here, everyone. And then here are the links to the organizations. So I wanted to start the discussion building off that. Everyone click the Jamboard if you want to participate and start talking about history. And Miss Angela knows I love connecting the dots on stuff. And I'd love to talk about history in terms of old history, in terms of recent history, in terms of new history inside the world of social equity. And I'm going to start with Natalie, because, I was looking at your report and, when you were creating your report, what's the historical statistic that really hit you in the gut the most when we're looking at the decades-long war on drugs, whether it be the ballooning police budgets in the 80s? I know the first part of the series focuses on that. Which is the one that hit you the most?
That's a really interesting question. I think the statistic that is probably most indicative of both the policies that were created as well as the way they were enforced is the fact that pre-1970, so 71, Nixon's official declaration of the war on drugs, drug use in the United States, illicit drug consumption, was declining, had been declining for several years. So generally you tend to wage a war when the threat is escalating or makes itself apparent. And when we look at sort of national surveys, that not only was not happening, this issue was actually it was going away naturally. And so the entire roots of our war on drugs are based on a flawed premise that this, enemy was growing in strength and numbers, when we know that's not to be true.
And Kika, We just talked old history. Let's talk new history. You've been at it down in LA. Kika's been a mover and shaker from the get-go. I've seen you down at City Hall. I've seen you at events. You don't know me, but let's talk new history. Let's talk recent history. Connect the dots for us of what this looks like as you as an applicant, as you as trying to activate applicants. And I don't think people appreciate how much this is a direct line when we're talking about social equity, when we're talking about these old policies that Natalie brought up. It's a direct line to what you're doing in this moment.
Absolutely. It's why I fight the way that I fight.
Yeah.
Because I understand the blood that was shed. I understand the lives lost. I understand the mothers and fathers, the sisters and brothers, the sons and daughters that are still incarcerated. You know, and so when I look at that board, Wally, and I love that because it's always been the question of how do we define social equity? So I love seeing all those. But what's missing are the faces. We get so caught up in what's not happening in the budget and the policies and fighting and going to Capitol Hill, but we don't see the people. We don't hear our stories. We don't hear the suffering of those who are still waiting to have a part of this industry. And, you know, that's what's lost. We're lost in this, as usual. And it's not until we start getting loud, it's not until we had to sue the city of Los Angeles that we start getting some respect off the things that we're saying. And it's to the point now, and I can go on to the history of how we got here and what they promised. And the fact that this recreational bill, specifically in Los Angeles, had the highest amount of votes of almost all of the legislation because of the fact that they said that they were going to invest back into the communities that were affected by the war on drugs. That's how we moved to recreational use. And instead, they walked us in the door. They put us in this trick bag. They had social equity applicants in the city of LA had to have properties, and LA being one of the most highest real estate markets in the world. I had to pay $12,000 a month for a property. Now, how is a person who's low income supposed to be able to afford that unless you're going to swim with the sharks and with these predatory investors? So from the beginning, without access to capital, with the consistent dismantling of everything that was said that they were going to give to social equity, the taxes going back to the community, social equity workers mandates where there were going to be jobs created for those who had barriers to entry. None of those things happened. The corporate social responsibility reporting, where are the taxes and where's the community benefits going back from those who already have the licenses? And so I say, it's something that we really need to start looking and understanding the pain and the hurt that continues outside of the war on drugs. But today, as those of us who are trying to enter the industry have every barrier possible to come into it, it's really important. And I thank you guys for having this discussion because our voices are important and they need to be heard so that compassion comes first. So I always say, instead of being an activist or an advocate, I'm a freedom fighter fighting for human rights and for us to be able to participate. And that should be everybody's. We should all be joining in that effort.
I love it. I love it. Yes. Yes to all of that. If you look on that original Jamboard, I put that number 348 million on there. That's July sales, this past July sales. Let's not forget what the real stakes of this are. And when we're talking about equity, when we roll up expungement, often we hear expungement and equity. Expungement, to me, that's a given. That should have already happened. Don't give me expungement and then let's not talk about this 348 million over here. Angela, let's talk about, Angela, I love you. First off.
I love you too, Wally.
If Angela, I've been, like they mentioned, I've been doing the social equity curriculum for Meadow. I don't know how I came across her path, how we crossed paths, but as far as a comprehensive program that is executing in the true spirit of social equity, I haven't found anyone as comprehensive as what Angela is doing and the team at Success Centers. So Angela, tell me about what your experience is in terms of helping applicants, because you're getting them through the pipeline. You're hand-holding, you're doing the messy work, and you're doing it without saying, hey, that license that you're getting closer to getting is looking mighty fine. You know what I mean? That you're helping them in the truest sense of the words with asking nothing back. So speak on what you see for people who are literally coming into you and being like, I want to get involved. What does that look like for you? And what does it looked like for you over these past few years? Because you guys are way ahead of the curve. I always tell you that.
Thank you, Wally. First of all, Natalie, I haven't read all of your report, but I wanted to tell you, because in 1971, what happened prior to that was the civil rights movement. So to me, that was a reactionary of Black people actually trying to move forward in this country. And so that was a punishment, this war on drugs, so that we could never move forward again in this country. And so I wanted to thank you for that report, but I just want people to recognize the fact that, you know, we're coming from long history in this country of working and building as chattel slaves. I am an American descendant of slaves, and I'm proud of that because through our fight and struggle, we're still here. We deserve to be here. More so than I think anyone else. And that's just my opinion. So when I came to Success Centers, Liz and I had talked, and there was this equity program that she was calling me to tell me about. And we were trying to work to see where we were going or how we were going to put this together. Basically, we didn't have a plan, until I got there. And I started to see that equity needs so much information, tools, building their spirits, because this war on drugs has devastated our families. And so I'm sorry, I lost the question because I get so worked up when I'm talking about the equity community, because I love this community, because this community is me.
Yes. No, you're absolutely right. I'll pick up where you left off when you're talking about destroying families. You know, the historical reference, the data point that always breaks my heart and had me activate in some moral, in every part of my life regarding this, had me quit the company I was working for to move over to Meadow, is off the first Los Angeles Social Equity Report. I'm quoting here, in 2008, the California Senate Office of Research and California Department of Corrections surveyed California prison inmates. Of the inmates they surveyed, 14% had been in foster care during their childhood. Nationwide, the number of youth who entered child welfare in 2015 due to drug use by a parent was 2% of all youth who entered child welfare. I want to connect the dots on that back to, and I'm going to go back to Natalie, because when you look at that data point, that is we're always talking about fundraising decks. We all know about that, right? For-profit, nonprofit, we're always trying to talk about fundraising decks. If we could go back, this is a horrible thought experiment, but if we could go back and look at the fundraising deck and projected outcomes, right? We're always talking about projected outcomes. The projected outcomes of the war on drugs, that 14% of the prison population went into foster care. We destroyed whole families over a period of 2 generations. And then we're going to keep on talking about, let's talk about what equity looks like. That word starts taking on different terms when we connect these dots. And that's where really, what I'm talking about in terms of policy. Natalie, can you help me out here? Because I'll keep going.
Yeah, well, I guess this is more of a comment. What we need to realize is that the war on drugs was not good policy gone bad. It was not we had great intentions, and unfortunately the way it worked on the ground ended up not being what we had hoped for. This was a very intentional effort, and this is not me being a conspiracy theorist. You can go to archives.gov and you can find transcripts and testimony. This was a deliberate attempt to enforce social control on certain populations. And that has been drug policy since the Opium Act of 1871, against Chinese nationals. So this is not, we can't, as we work to undo some of these harms, we have to really hold people accountable because they were aware of what they were doing. I often say, people speak to the 100-to-1 crack versus powder cocaine sentencing disparity. That is viscerally unjust. And And even though the First Step Act did try and unwind that, it's still 18-1. There is no rational scientific basis for it to be 18-1. And we are applauding people for doing something that's still unjust. And while it's better than 100-1, it's not where it needs to be. But when you look, I think people who have been trying to roll that back say today when they're pressed on it, well, we didn't know. That's not true. The U.S. Sentencing Commission, a federal agency, nonpartisan, when that was proposed, went on the floor of Congress and said, this makes no sense. It's the same substance. So people heard and they chose to ignore because it suited their own sort of professional interest. And so I think we need to, I don't like punishment. I like accountability. Because, we know that the criminal legal system ratchets only in one way, and that's more punishment and stiffer punishments, and that's not what we're trying to do. But we need to make sure people need to eat their words and be confronted with the receipts because they're there. And it doesn't, people can't change their minds and try and undo the harms, but washing our hands of it is disingenuous. They're lies. They're lies.
Kika, Angela, hop in right here.
No, I'm in total agreement. I work with the equity community in San Francisco, and these stories that are being told. I heard Reese the other day on here talking about how her family was destroyed basically, and she's standing alone right now today, trying to face being a sole proprietor of a business. Reese is a special, she's a special woman, what she's fought through. But just imagine, everyone does not have that kind of a fighting spirit. And so what I'm constantly working with equity is letting them know that they're valid, they deserve to be here. We try to get as many resources for equity that they need. Folks are coming in to help, like Wally at Meadow, and Jessica Strange, Marie Montmarquet, because what we need to do is focus on how we're going to get through to be a part of this industry and be respected in this industry because we deserve to be here. So those are some of the things that we're working with as Success Centers. We deserve to be here, and I want industry to know that it's your responsibility to make sure that we remain here. It's not an easy journey. There's so many different things that we're coming in from the legacy market, because I don't like using illicit and I don't like using black market and all that kind of stuff, because that's all we've had. And we're going to do whatever it is we need to do to become a part of it. So if you don't want those things to go away, start reaching out, start incubating, start doing some of the things that you can do as business owners in this industry to make sure that we're uplifted in this, because cannabis industry has to be done right.
I heard Natalie say two things that rang out to me, and that's accountability. Mm-hmm. And the fact that the war on drugs was set up that way. And I would say the social equity program, as I've witnessed it, they've been designed to fail. And so I think that's where we start needing to see the accountability on these politicians that create these programs without a budget and finance. We were fighting for the city of LA. The social equity program was to start with $10 million. Instead, it went to enforcement. They moved it out of the general fund. We had to wait another year. We still never saw the next 3 million. They just got another 6 million. And to this day, 3 years later, we have no technical assistance programs. We have no business and compliance support. We have no attorneys to help us get out of these predatory contracts. And yet there got to be a good 20-something million dollars that should have went through the coffers and did not come to us. And so I say there becomes a point when they hold us accountable, when we're carrying a dime bag of weed, of which my stepfather served 5 years for. There has to be accountability to these politicians that do not just simply follow the rules of law. If you write there's to be a corporate social responsibility program and it starts in January of 2019 and it isn't there, why is there not someone being fired? Why is there not accountability? And it can't just be that we always bear the weight of the accountability. And though I say, and I agree with Sister Angela, the industry needs to step in. It needs to be more than our voices saying it. We cannot do it alone. We need y'all to echo what we're saying to your lobbyists, right? Who are behind the scenes talking to the politicians. We need our voice to be amplified. And that's why we're here today, to shed some light, to ask for compassion and ask for your voices to be louder than ours, because you got access to the capital, the marketing resources, the PR folks that can get behind and amplify our messages. And it is important. And we're seeing what's happening right now in society with the Black Lives Matter. You don't want to get to the point where it gets so bad that then it just becomes a whole bunch of confusion. And we're at a pivotal point where we can create accountability, where we can hold ourselves accountable. I know how many retailers that are out there that can have a whole section, just like they did with fair trade back in the day, have a whole section for social equity suppliers. There's a lot of things that we can do, but I do say it is important that we look at these policies and then hold these politicians accountable for what is just written in the rule of law.
I love it. Thank you. I always like it to keep everything celebratory and revelatory. And when we're talking about what Kika is saying about us connecting, I think it's one of those, our industry, just like every other industry, it's one of the weird outcomes of the pandemic. I would never be having this conversation right now. I'd never be working with Angela if it wasn't for the pandemic. But that being said, I'm going to go back to that number. Let's not forget it. 348 million. That's 1 month of recreational cannabis sales. 1 month, highest month this past year, but that's 1 month. And then we're going to talk about equity. What does it look like? And I love, I'd love to build off what Kika's saying. And I sent it over when we were beginning the discussion in the share doc, is the idea of have the programs themselves. I remember was a great moment. I remember when they went over to New Jersey and they were like, we want to legalize. And New Jersey was like, we got you. They're like, expungement. They're like, no, we see everything that's going on. We'll wait. We want to do it right, right? So I think when we're talking about the programs themselves becoming barriers to entry, this is what comes to mind, is the system as it's set up right now even capable of achieving it due to the existing power structures and what does it look like when we're talking about activating outside of it, to getting vertical outside of it, to move the needle collectively. I love what Kat said, it was probably a year or so ago. I'm sure she repeats it often, Kat Packer. We're not in competition with each other. And I think that is, we start looking at the dispensaries, we look at that 348 million, and the best of us look at it and see, how can I get mine? First rule of capitalism, there's only one ladder, right? Second rule, that's a small door. We got to fight for that ladder. We got to get in that door. That's not but in reality, what do we have here? We have activated community. And I'm already seeing that when we come together, we can collectively move things. We're connecting resources. And Angela, I want to talk to you about that because I feel like you're at the nexus of it right now. She's given, to give you guys, those that don't know Angela, she's doing comprehensive training across the supply chain. She's doing tours of active cultivators. She is truly educating people right from the beginning. So when we're talking about what more we can do and what more resources is needed, and Kika as well, please join in and tell me, what do we need to do to work together? Right now we're talking, but how do we activate and work together to move it forward?
Okay, so I have to apologize because my internet keeps maybe losing or dropping off. So if that's the case, just, but yeah, so one of the things that we're doing at Success Centers is educating folks. We know a lot of folks in the community weren't able to go to college, but there are from the hire. I'm constantly talking to these employers, equity footprint in their company, who's sitting around the table helping make decisions. Make sure that you have people that look like me and an array of other folks from the minority communities. That's very important. When you hire, when you bring on your recruiters, make sure when they see a name like Utopia Hammond or Kimra Wilson, that they're not chunking those aside because they know that those are not traditionally Caucasian names. Pull some of this, look at those resumes, and maybe you are passing up a gem if you don't have the type of recruiters that are looking at that. The educational piece for equity. Equity needs everything. I've had some of the greatest help from the cannabis community coming in, folks from out of state as well as in state, because they know that we're trying to assist with equity here. So all the help needs to be, all the help that equity needs, I'm trying to provide, whatever it is.
And Kika, talk about immediate needs. I love what you're doing at your organization. Talk about immediate needs. Talk about, let's not forget, I think we often forget, we're the biggest in the world. Everybody that's activated in this room, we're the biggest in the world. Cannabis, we're talking cannabis entrepreneurs, cannabis professionals, we're the biggest in the world. You're looking at them across the screen. We got the best product. We have the largest supply chain, and we have the largest recreational market. We've had the largest recreational market in Southern California and up and down the state since the beginning. So, Kika, when we're talking about what LA needs, because I do think we'll need at some point get into a regional discussion if we have time, because I'd love to compare and contrast the needs of LA, which is an animal unto itself, compared to what Oakland and the NorCal teams are seeing with Angela. But as far as LA, Kika.
Yeah, I think we need to go back to the roots of cannabis. And I think there's one thing, that separates us from the automobile industry, the tobacco industry, the alcohol industry, is the healing powers behind this plant and what this industry is based on, and the compassion that was first there when it was so community oriented. And I think first and foremost, that's the first piece that we as an industry have to get back to. We got to step aside. That money is going to keep coming because the plant is going to keep growing. But I would say first, in every city, I have my product in Whole Foods, and I had to go to a third-party auditor. I said the first thing that is needed, we need some third-party audits happening to these local municipalities in the state. And it can be outside of the politicians. It can be industry folks that get together and start holding accountability. And I believe there needs to be a working group. There needs to be a commission. When Governor Newsom was lieutenant governor, he had the Blue Ribbon Commission for Cannabis. There needs to be a social equity commission of social equity license holders and workers that start being the working group and saying what our needs are and how these policies are actually affecting us in real time. Those are two simple solutions. We're not being heard as policy is being developed. And
go ahead.
and we saw out of the need of having so many folks, unfortunately, even those that look like us, that say that they were advocates, but actually had their own agendas and the sharecropper agreements. We saw the need to unionize, and that's why we formed the Social Equity Owners and Workers Association. And at the heart of what is needed is an ecosystem of support, that we're not relying on government assistance to do it. We need lawyers, we need accountants, we need mentors and advisors that can get on the call with us, like the Big Brother and Big Sister programs, and walk us through, I'm having problems with this software, I just got dinged for this, what do I do next? What does this pro forma mean? We just need information and knowledge and support and incubation. And if each one of y'all and all of your managers, all of the C-level suite people, all the board members took a moment, 2 hours a month to dedicate to starting to share the wealth of your information. You will save us time and money that we do not have to properly to compete. And I said, that's the part that we're piloting, the equity support system. So all of y'all out there who are mentors and advisors, please reach out to us. Angela, I love the work that you're doing. Natalie, keep bringing the information to us. But that's what we're in need of, because there's only so much money you can tap into, and there's more people that need the support than we can handle individually, even in a class of 30 or 50 people. And so if enough of us start to mount up and offer some of what we have, that's going back to the roots of what this plan is about.
And Natalie, you've got this wonderful 30,000 foot view of the historical consequences. And back to that idea of the projected outcomes. And as we look forward, because I'll tell you, I worked for a Canadian company for a minute, and I was driving down Arlington, down into South Central, and the Canadian company I was working for, they had bought an equity stake into a dispensary in South Central LA. And it was clearly a backdoor deal. And I worked there for a little under a year. And I left, and I was driving back, and I was just like, there's a version. Let's not forget this. Everybody needs to remember this. There's a version when we're talking about community development that these dollars, that 348 million leave California. They go. They don't come back. They're not going over to Nevada to come back over the border when people want to buy, because they're legal over there. They're going out of the state to the other coast, and sometimes out of the country. Those dollars do not come back. So when we're talking about policy, historical policy going forward, Natalie, what has been, if you had a wish list as you look forward to make things right, but in an activated way, what would that look like?
So many things, but I think the overarching theme of all of them is a lot of this has been done before. The cannabis industry, regulated cannabis industry, is doing a lot of novel things. There are things that are happening that don't have direct historical parallels, but those are few and far between. It may not be about cannabis, but we've seen this dynamic, closed markets,
Yes.
Cost prohibitive licensing, arrangements. This has been done over and over again, and it fails every single time. And no one can seem to read a book. Just read a book, and you know how this goes. Like right now, I'm working on sort of advocating for federal descheduling. You know what I'm looking at in case law? I'm looking at federal breastfeeding regulations. Like there are you have to be creative, but we have like historical context that will inform our policies. And that's why I think, and then when we do rely on that, we over rely on it. So to Angela and Kika, I'm sure encounter this every single day, but we need to be questioning at every single step why things are the way they are. Like, do you really need an 8-person regulatory body to do this? A brand new one that, tens of millions of dollars it takes to stand up? Or are there not bodies and resources and processes that could have just been reused and done this more efficiently and effectively without needing to hire and retrain and whatnot to do so? Like, we need to realize that there's like an assumption that everything's done for the greater good. I would say 95 to 99% of things are done just because that's how they were done before. Mm. And so devil's in the details. Don't just read the headline, read the bill, mark it up, highlight it. You're not smarter than, the lawyers aren't always smarter than you. The accountants aren't always smarter than you. Read it and see sort of what's lacking, what's a little sketchy, and where you can bring information from other areas and arenas into your advocacy and your policy development.
I love that. And just so I remember before we run out of time, shout out to Tamika and Hillary, who's doing This Is Our Dream nonprofit. Tamika hosted early in Meadowlands, but shout out to them as well. Check them out at This Is Our Dream. They're doing wonderful work down in LA specific. But to build off what Natalie's saying, because this is where I'm at with it, and what Kika said is what I'm always struck with. Two terms come to mind: is visibility and transparency, right? And I'm always, I'm active in the nonprofit community here in Los Angeles, outside of cannabis, and every single time I report I give to a nonprofit leader the historical stakes of this, of the actual history, the actual numbers in terms of whether we're talking, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe was it a 400% or 600% increase in the California's prison population during the war on drugs. I can't remember which one offhand. It's gigantic. And when you connect gang enhancement sentencing with ballooning police budgets in conjunction with the policy, you destroyed everything. They raised whole communities. And when you connect those dots for people, and then you talk about, once again, social equity cannabis licensing and the projected outcomes of the industry, back to that 348 million, they're like, how is no one know this is going on? And I'm like, yeah, this is bananas. What, this past week we saw Newsom bring up the discussion of reparations in Sacramento. It's a beautiful thing. But when we're talking about reparations, back to the beginning of the conversation, that's how I see the lens of social equity of cannabis industry. There's a version, the industry was literally built on Black and brown bodies. There's a version, building off what Natalie said, as we look forward to create a policy that is truly giving true equity. I'll throw that out there. Angela, Kika, hop in with whatever. We got like 14 minutes. We can get it loose.
I'll just say this. I'm so thankful to Gavin for opening up that conversation and signing that legislation. Just imagine, coming from my descendancy, just looking at the reparations really quick. I wouldn't have to. To me, if that were done, there wouldn't be any problem with mass incarceration, because people would have what they should rightfully have. There wouldn't be any problem with us starting businesses, because we would have what we already have. I could call a friend up, like, hey, Kika, you want to go invest on the business? These things were taken from our community, from inventions to, you can redlining, convict leasing, all of these things that affected our community, that has us now as a bottom caste in a country that we actually built. If we got our reparations, listen, a lot of these problems and issues that we're stomping out in the streets, fix the shit campaign that's going on all over the country right now, people are protesting, would be actually eliminated. So if you want to get behind something, get behind reparations for folks that have been totally stripped of the right to exist in this country.
Can I butt in really quickly?
Yes.
Yeah. Angela,
I
agree that reparations are a conversation that needs to be explored. We need to go down that path. But I would warn everyone, reparations aren't going to fix this. Don't let it be a distraction, a welcome distraction, because it's policy that's doing it. Like, a check is not going to unwind that. And so I don't want it to be like what we've seen in social equity programs where, we're definitely going to do this thing. We're going to put this funding in. And then you see the policies in which it's supposed to be enacted, and they actually are recriminalizing, or they're actually, some backdoor maneuver. So, while we should be steadfast in our desire to make amends, we can't ignore that, that's not going to do it all. So I think we need to make sure that we hold people accountable for other things beyond as we move forward.
I have to say, access to capital is everything. Closing this economic wealth gap is everything.
Yes, it is.
That's where we start to see the change. And so, the structure of how that looks once again, we started getting these working groups together that are in a power position, that once these recommendations are made, they can actually be implemented. And then that same working group can hold those folks accountable for making sure that they implement what's in it. But I can say something as simple as the Jewish Free Loan Association. And I remember when I was homeless, and I'm from South Central LA and low income, and they had a simple process and a fund that was developed, whether you were about to be evicted, whether you were starting a business, there was access to no interest loans. And I didn't have to be Jewish to participate, but this was done by a community that gathered together to create this fund. And so I say, you know, reparations, yeah, great. You know, probably will get caught up in all the paperwork, and we probably still only see a penny on the dollar of which they say we're going to get. But once again, when we're sitting here and looking at how we can be solution-based, and waiting on the government can take a long time. And right now this industry is growing by leaps and bounds, and we are not in it. When you look at the fact that African Americans only get 1% of venture capital of the $1 billion that are raised every year, it's a problem funding Black businesses. And so I would say that we can't enter into this and compete. We can't enter into this and contribute. We can't enter into this and begin to reinvest in our communities and make a difference for ourselves. We don't need everybody to do it. We can do it if we have access. So whether we call it reparations or whether we call it an interest-free loan, the capital needs to be compiled. And all of you that are making the millions and billions of dollars, these large multi-state operators, this 348 million that you just spoke of, there becomes accountability where we stop complaining about the taxes and enforcement and so forth and start doing some goddamn good. We can't change it. We're gonna keep saying this. I watched Good Trouble about Congressman John Lewis and saw them folks standing at that lunch table, and it wasn't just Black people sitting there. And it becomes a point we got to start organizing, create pressure amongst ourselves. And those dollars have to start coming in, y'all, to support the programs that are happening in all these cities, the Angelas of the nation, because there are a lot of us in Oakland and San Francisco. Nina, I see you on here, Amber Center, what's going on? There are a lot of us, the Hood Incubator, there are a lot of us that could be funding and we're doing worthwhile programs, but we don't have what we need to lend the money to the applicants to start their businesses. No matter how much education and programming we do, if we can't fund the businesses, we're still left susceptible to the predators, period. We're just well educated. And so I think that becomes a great starting point for all you great CEOs on this call out here to start gathering together, form it, put it together, create some interest-free loans funds for us so we don't have to rely on the state and the city and their good slow time of getting it to us.
Yeah, a applicant should not require a team of lawyers to open a business. It goes back to the transparency. What's going on is it's not okay. The fundraising stakes and when I hear you talk, Kika, you know where my head goes, and it makes my heart hurt. I start thinking of payday
loans.
No,
yes,
Angela,
yes, it's straight predatory.
We're gonna give you that. We're gonna give you your short money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
At expanded interest rates.
Mm-hmm.
In the terms of cannabis, is equity stakes in your license. Knowing that long term, not even long term, medium term, you got to keep on we're going to get you on the comeback. I mean, it's unconscionable. Back to the transparency, back to, I look at the amount of information that's out there and the different business models, the social enterprise business model. I don't know why it has not made its way into cannabis in terms of for-profit businesses that directly benefit the communities they serve. It's out there. Just as Natalie said, the existing systems are causing a lot of the problems. There's existing systems that we have that we can bring into cannabis and business models that are more equitable. And at this point, I find it hard to believe that not more people are recognizing it. But that's why we're doing the call.
Exactly.
That's why we're doing
I just wanted to say to Wally that, in these doors that, with these programs that we're doing, a lot of the stuff we've been doing is unfunded. you're trying to make something out of nothing. And so I'm getting folks with good heart, good cannabis spirit that are coming through my doors and calling and Miss Angela, how can we help the equity community? Because we know that help needs to happen. I want people to just remember the cannabis spirit and how it's so very important that we represent this plant in the right kind of way, making sure that we are extending the hand to the next person, those lifting up those who traditionally have been left behind. And I'm getting that. And our workshops are so full of wonderful people that care about our community. And I want to keep that movement going. We know that there's a lot going on that's wrong with the system, the way it's set up. But we want to continue to just keep this movement going forward. I'm so pleased that I was on this panel with Kika and Natalie and you, Wally. Thank you, because I know we're running out of time. So that'll be probably my last words.
Yeah, final words, Kika and Natalie. Hop in there.
I'll say there's an ethical and a moral implication to all of this. Like businesses, well-financed businesses should be investing in equity applicants and equity businesses, in my opinion. But even if you were to toss that out, there is a business case for this. And I know, people right now in these early days, you see this predatory behavior by mid-size operators, larger operators, trying to squeeze social equity applicants out, push forward policies that make it even more difficult to get an in. And there seems to be a lack of awareness. Like, I'm based in New York. The big players have not entered yet, and they will eat everyone for lunch. So I am sitting there talking to people with $12 billion. And the moment that, social equity sort of activists do the work and sort of get the regulations to what they need to be, they will swoop in, and no one, not even the big players now, will be able to survive. But if these, two groups were to come together and have a mutually beneficial relationship, you're ensuring your survival as well. So it's, let's not be crabs in a bucket here, because what's coming, it like this squabbling and this, parsimony, it doesn't make sense in even a near-term horizon. So if you don't want to do it for ethical reasons, moral reasons, do it for your own pocketbook. You know what I mean? And that 30,000 foot view is definitely, in my experience, been totally lost.
Kika, close it out for us.
Well, I'm gonna say 3 little points. I'm gonna have one personal one that I want all y'all who are in positions of power. This is a critically important, as these 200 new licenses that are coming up in retail with new equity share guidelines that were great. But the DCR has said that they will not vet these agreements to see if they comply with the equity share guidelines, leaving us applicants in a position to have to find lawyers if we want to dispute. Absolutely ridiculous. So I'd say I would ask all of you who can call council members, call the mayor's office, demand that the DCR be accountable for reviewing equity share requirements. It's critical to this first round of licenses that will come to the table, because it will set the stage for the rest. So I ask that one thing is so critically important. And then I would say to all of those who are in the supply chain, mentor, support a social equity applicant, put us on your shelves, teach us what you know, tell us the best practices so that we have the best chances of being successful. And I'm gonna leave it at that. I appreciate being here. I appreciate amplifying the message, and much love and blessings.
Blessings to you all. I love it. I'll hang it back to Aria. Thank you again, Angela, Kika, Natalie. This was incredible.
Thank you all. This is amazing.
Thank you.